Greetings everyone. Today we're going to be talking about quoting, specifically when you should quote, how to format quotes in MLA, and how to avoid what I call quote dumping. Now, quoting is not just about copying a sentence from a reading, it's really about using someone else's words strategically to support your argument. Let's go ahead and get started. So why should we even quote at all? Now, first, to support your argument with credible evidence. Second, because sometimes the original language is just so powerful that you don't actually want to water it down. And third, quoting shows that you're entering this larger conversation that's already being had. So ultimately, for this essay, you're responding to experts like Bregman, Tolentino, and or Marquez. You're just not talking into the void. So you're thinking about how you can kind of hop into that conversation. Now, the key here is that quoting shows that you also did the reading, and integrating it ultimately shows that you understand it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the differences between quoting, paraphrasing, and summary. This is going to be a quick review. So a quote uses the exact words in quotation marks. This is, you're not changing anything, and if you are signaling to us what you are changing, and I'll show you guys how to do that later. A paraphrase restates the main idea in your own words, and it's usually about the same length. And a summary condenses the idea into something a lot shorter. So all three of these require citation, but today we're just going to focus on quoting. But remember, so your essay can have some variety, you want to make sure that your essay uses all three of these, okay? Ultimately, what we find is that your voice should be doing most of the work. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about when we should quote, or sorry, verbs and phrases to introduce our quotes. So really important. We want to make sure that we don't just drop quotes into our paper. We want to make sure that we introduce it. And there's a few ways to do that. So here we have one method, which is using signal phrases, such as Bregman argues, Tolentino claims, Marquez observes. Now this is going to help your writing flow a little bit better, and it makes it clear who is speaking. It also just sounds more academic and polished. So you can mix it up so it doesn't sound repetitive. Here's some verbs that you can use, and then if you click here, it'll take you to a page where it'll provide even more verbs. So make sure you add some variety, that way it doesn't get repetitive for you and the reader. Okay, so if a quote is shorter than 4 lines, you want to make sure that you keep it in quotation marks. You're going to introduce it with the signal phrase, include the parenthetical citation, and the period goes after the citation outside of your parentheses. So if you see right here, it's going to go outside of it, right? So we have the example, Tolentino argues that, quote, work is no longer just a job, it's an identity. We close the quotation mark at our parenthetical citation, which is just page 3. And the reason we don't add Tolentino 3 is because we're already letting the reader know that Tolentino said this. So we're just going to give the reader our page number, the one that we used. We also have another example here. You guys could take a look at that. All right, let's talk a little bit about block quotes. So this is if a quote is longer than 4 lines, so you're going to format it as a block quote. So you'll indent the entire quote, about 0.5 inches, no quotation marks. The period is going to go before the citation, so it's going to look a little bit different than our a shorter quote. You don't need block quotes probably for essay 1 since it is a shorter essay, but if you are using it, make sure that you're analyzing it deeply. Like it should be the much longer than 4 lines, 5 lines, which is what the block quote would be. And this is an example right here. So as you can see, you introduce your block quote, that's right here, and then this is the quote itself. You see how there's no quotation marks, and this is more longer than 4 lines, and the punctuation goes before our parenthetical citation, so it's going to go right here, and then you just continue writing. Okay. Okay. So this is where I find students struggle the most. You want to make sure that you blend your quotes into your own sentence. This just creates this seamlessness that makes it feel a little bit more natural. So we have the example right here. In her article, quote, "The gig economy celebrates working yourself to death, comma, Gio Tolentino argues that." So the first time that you introduce an author to us, this is how you're going to be doing it. Thereafter, you can just address them with their last name. So you can use a signal phrase with a strong verb to lead the quote in. So again, we talked about earlier those signal phrases. You can blend the quote into your sentence. So Marquez calls hustle culture a silent epidemic that glorifies overwork. As you see, that's blended really nicely into this whole sentence versus just using signal phrases over and over again. So this is another way that you can do it. All right, and here's some more signal phrase examples. So as Bregman writes, comma, and then a quote, "Sleep deprivation is your drug of choice, comma," and then claims Tolentino. So again, I want to make sure that we stress that the first time that you introduce the author, you will introduce them with their full name and the article that they wrote. Thereafter, in the body paragraphs or wherever, you're only going to address them by their last name. This just creates less noise in your essay as you're writing it and also as one is reading it. We have another example here. The first time you're going to be introducing it. All right, so blending paraphrase and quotations. And that's important for us to do this because we don't want you to just kind of be listing quote after quote after quote because that can get kind of redundant. You want to blend paraphrase in one section maybe or one idea and then quote a really powerful phrase. So an example here could be hustle culture, Marquez notes, can cause a constant sense of anxiety, making people feel like they are never doing enough. So you see how your voice leads and supports that quote. That is really what strong academic writing looks like. The centerpiece of the essay should be your ideas, your argument, what you have to say. You are just going to bring in your sources whenever you need a little bit of support. So you can kind of look at it that way. All right. I also love this great metaphor of the quote sandwich. So you'll think of it like a sandwich. So the top bun is going to introduce the quote. The meat is the quote itself. And then the bottom bun is your explanation. You don't ever want to just drop a quote in without explaining it. So after every single quote, you want to ask yourself, why does this matter? How does it prove my thesis? Your voice should always be stronger than the quote. All right. Okay, so here is a quick example of how we can edit our quotes. So you are allowed to edit an author's quotes. However, you do need to signal that you are doing it. So if you are shortening it or if you're changing a word or something, so here we have, if you're clarifying, you can use brackets. If you are adjusting it, say if you're shortening or omitting something, you can use the ellipses right here. So we have an example. Marquez argues that hustle culture leaves us perpetually tethered to professional roles. So here, it is signaling to me that something was omitted. So maybe I'm interested and I want to see what the full quote looks like. So I'll go back to page 5 and see what the full quote reads as. And then we have brackets right here. That's it under encasing leaves us. So that's telling me that you changed the wording a little bit. So you're just correcting the verb tense essentially. And then we have another example here. So we omitted something. You see the original text is a lot longer, but maybe it just wasn't relevant to what you're saying or arguing. So that's why we may omit it. We want to make sure that we do this so we are able to represent what the author is saying as accurately, and that way so the reader can go back if they want to look at that full quote. All right. Okay. So what if an author is quoting another author? So say Tolentino is quoting somebody else. So you're going to quote that a little bit differently. So if they quoted someone else, you can include it, but we want to make sure we format it correctly. So you're going to use single quotation marks inside the double quotation marks, if that makes sense. So it can get a little bit messy, but so if you can avoid doing that, do it. But if not, this is how you would do it. So Tolentino notes that Brian Menendez at Gizmodo commented, comma, we have the quote, and then we include our parenthetical citation. We put QTD, shorthand for quoted, in Tolentino too. So that's pretty much what it'll look like. Okay, so in-text citation rules for this class specifically. Because as you know, I'm giving you printouts, giving you PDFs, etc. I want you to use the page numbers that are assigned on those PDFs. That's just for clarity's sake, because that way we have the same copy, so it'll just be easier for me to be able to go back to look at it and check something if I need to. Don't include URLs, don't include full web addresses in your in-text citations either. All right, so why not just paraphrase or summarize? So you should, but quoting really helps when you want to make sure that you're getting the author's exact phrasing, or you want to analyze the quote. So you can paraphrase and summarize if you're really good at explaining like a general idea, or if it's like a simple idea that is easy to explain, or if you want your voice to stay center stage. That's why I mentioned earlier, don't just use one. Use all of them. Use all of the tools in your arsenal: quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing. And that's just going to make your essay flow a little bit more, and it won't be as stiff. All right, so before you submit that essay, you want to ask yourself, did I introduce the quote? Did I format the quote correctly? Did I explain it afterward? Is the punctuation correct? Is page number outside the quotation marks? So all of these quotes that you're using, you want to make sure that they all have some sort of lead in, or if you're not doing that, that you're embedding them correctly, and that your punctuation rules are accurate. So here we have a quick little cheat sheet. So it'll be like this inside if it's part of the quote. It'll be like this if it's outside of and part of your sentence, so if it's a question you may be asking. And you want to place the page number outside of the quote. All right, so let's try. So as you begin drafting essay 1, make sure that all of your quotes have signal phrases, are formatted in MLA style, and are followed by your commentary. Remember, quotes are just there to support your argument, but they don't replace it. Your paper should really sound like you, and not a collection of Bregman, Tolentino, or Marquez stitched together. Okay, so we want to make sure, again, it should be your argument at the forefront, and then we're just bringing in these experts to support your ideas. All right, and that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all later. Bye-bye.